The spear, still pulsing with radiant white energy, tore through Claude's body before piercing into the tower behind them. Then, the spear moved again. It hummed with power, vibrating in the air, before it suddenly began to retract, its energy trails slicing through the space around it. Luka's breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened in panic as the glowing spear rushed past him. Before we dive into our next episode, I invite you to pause a moment. Let your heart speak in the comments, share your thoughts, your dreams, and what you'd like me to refine. Every word you leave is a gentle nudge toward perfection. If you're ready to be part of this ever-evolving journey, hit that subscribe button and join our passionate community. Your feedback isn't just welcome, it's cherished. The paladin extended his hand, completely unshaken, and caught the spear with effortless precision. Then, he stood still. Calm, unbothered. Luka's gaze snapped downward. His body froze. His mind reeled. Claude's body lay motionless on the ground. His legs remained where they had fallen, but his upper torso was gone. Luka's thoughts spiraled. A memory surfaced, Claude's voice, playful, teasing. I was gonna introduce my younger sister to you if you didn't have a woman in mind. Luka's throat tightened. His breath came in ragged gasps as sweat dripped down his face, his hands trembling. He couldn't tear his gaze away from Claude's severed lower half. His mind screamed. I thought I saw the spear glow, but, his mechanical eye flickered. Then, red error messages flooded his vision. His helmet's internal display glitched. Error, error, error. Luka's pulse skyrocketed. Work, damn it, work. But the system refused to respond. Calculate the trajectory of the spear, no matter what. The paladin remained motionless, gripping his glowing spear. Then, he moved. His hand began to glow once more. Luka barely had time to process before the paladin hurled the spear toward him. His entire body seized up. His feet refused to move. Then, gunfire erupted. The paladin shifted, activating a shield, the translucent barrier forming in front of him as bullets ricocheted off its shimmering surface. 3 figures rushed toward Luka. Their helmets obscured their faces, but their movements were sharp, controlled. One of them shouted, Luka, get it together. Luka's mind snapped back to reality. His breathing evened out, but the panic still gripped his chest. Then, a familiar voice, urgent, commanding. Don't just stand there. Luka's head turned. Ailey. His vision cleared. His heartbeat steadied. No, he's right. Luka's grip on reality tightened. Even if I try to run, I won't be able to escape this situation. Luka's fingers curled around his sword hilt. Then there's only one way to tackle this. His hand shot to his side. He drew his blade. A deep crimson glow radiated from the sword's shimmering edge. Luka shifted into a fighting stance. His mind cleared. I'll fight until the Imperial Guard arrives. A thought flashed through his mind, a memory. The image of a fully armored Imperial Guard, standing silently. Luka clenched his jaw. If we hold on for just a dozen or so seconds, I'm sure the Imperial Guard that was watching will step in. A timer appeared on Luka's helmet display. 0.00 seconds. He stood frozen, sword in hand, facing the paladin, whose square artifact continued to shine ominously above his head. The paladin rose, calmly. The timer ticked forward, 1.22 seconds. The paladin lifted his hand, his movements deliberate, unhurried. A spear materialized above his palm, pulsing with raw energy. 1.65 seconds. Then, with a flick of his wrist, the paladin launched the spear. It vanished. By the time Luka registered the attack, the spear was already beside his head. 1.72 seconds. A single inch separated him from certain death. Luka's heart pounded against his ribs. No. Instinct took over. He swung his sword to deflect the projectile, but it wasn't enough. The spear barely missed his skull, tearing through his helmet, sending shards of metal flying. A deep gash split across Luka's cheek, blood trickling down his face. 2.15 seconds. The paladin moved again. 2.25 seconds. The spear reversed direction. 2.68 seconds. Luka's eyes widened in terror. The spear was returning, at full speed. He saw his reflection in the shining surface, the glow of the weapon reflecting in his panicked gaze. Darkness crept into his vision. A singular thought overtook everything else, death. A cold, paralyzing realization seized him. Am I going to die? His mind screamed. There's no way I can survive against that monster for even a dozen seconds. Then, a shadow loomed over him. A voice, sharp, commanding, unyielding. Trainee. Luka's vision blurred as a red glow burned through the darkness. A familiar cap, a menacing aura. Commander Hamilas. A cruel smirk twisted the commander's face. You look like a pig that's just realized it's about to be slaughtered. Luka shuddered. Hamila's voice boomed, slicing through his spiraling panic. Turn your back on the enemy, and all you'll receive is a bullet to the head. The words struck like a whip, jolting Luka's senses. If the enemy swings their blade, then you do the same. The Imperial Guard has no need for weaklings. Luka's fingers twitched. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. His heartbeat quickened. The timer kept ticking. 3.00 seconds. Luka shifted his foot. His mind cleared. A singular, unwavering thought solidified. Before he begins moving, Luka lifted his sword. I'll attack him first. The spear hurtled toward him. Luka swung. 3.21 seconds. His blade met the spear. A violent shockwave erupted. A deafening boom followed. 4.36 seconds. The spear's glow shattered upon impact. A flicker of hope. Then, a blast. From the side, Eilei's voice rang out, panic evident. Luka. Something flew into the air, spinning, shining. Luka's sword. It came crashing down, broken. 5.27 seconds. His cloak tore apart. Pain seared through his hand. His metal fingers cracked under the force of the impact. A sickening crunch. Luka's breath hitched, his body trembling. 6.11 seconds. Luka stared at his ruined hand. His fingers wouldn't move. He clenched his jaw. His mind whispered, I can't use my hand anymore. His fingers twitched painfully, but I managed to block the spear. Luka's eyes locked onto the paladin, who gripped his sword firmly, attempting to wrench it free from the ground. Luka's teeth clenched, his breath ragged. His mind screamed, I need to prepare for the next attack. The timer on his display ticked forward, 7.51 seconds. The paladin moved forward, each step deliberate. His entire body began to glow, energy radiating from within like an awakening storm. He was calm, collected, unshaken. 8.21 seconds. Then, with a final, effortless pull, the paladin unsheathed his sword, releasing a devastating force attack. A blinding arc of energy erupted from his blade. Luka barely had time to react. The attack tore through his arm. The severed limb fell in pieces as the force wave passed him. His body jolted from the shock, but the attack didn't stop there. Behind him, 3 trainees stood frozen, among them, Eilei. The force wave struck them head-on. Eilei's arms were severed instantly. The others, limbs torn apart, bodies thrown back. Eilei's eyes widened in confusion, blood dripping from his ruined arms. 9.51 seconds. Luka's stomach twisted. His breath came in ragged gasps, his mind spiraling. He wasn't even aiming for me. His focus wavered. Eilei. His cry was raw, desperate. But the moment his attention shifted away, the paladin moved. In an instant, he leaped forward. 10.21 seconds. Luka barely turned his head. The paladin's hand was already inches from his face. 11.53 seconds. His one remaining arm was crippled. His sword was gone. His body, completely exposed. His eyes went wide in panic. Damn it. The paladin loomed over him, sword gripped in both hands, poised to end it. Luka's instincts screamed. His vision blurred with frustration, pain, and sheer desperation. His eyes glowed bright red. 12.09 seconds. The paladin brought his blade down, but Luka moved. He charged straight toward him. 12.44 seconds. 2 warriors, one with nothing left to lose, the other an unshaken executioner. Luka's mind screamed, survive. But in that moment, a shadow moved. From the treetops, a figure stood, motionless. Then, a sudden burst of flame ignited beneath his boots. A thunderous force propelled him forward. His body emerged from the darkness, a warrior in black and red armor. His movements blurred, faster than light. Luka and the paladin were about to clash, but before their weapons could connect, a hand seized the paladin's head. A loud, sickening crack echoed as fractures spread across the paladin's helmet. Luka's eyes widened in shock. What? The paladin's body jerked violently, yanked away as if he weighed nothing. Then, a devastating impact. The Imperial Guard slammed the paladin's skull into the ground. The earth split beneath them. But the Imperial Guard wasn't done, dragging the paladin across the ground as though he were nothing more than a ragdoll. Without hesitation, he reached to his leg holster, drawing a heavy firearm. He aimed the barrel directly at the paladin's head. The paladin, still gripping his sword, struggled against the overwhelming force. But the Imperial Guard was relentless. He pushed the gun further down. The warrior's red cloak billowed behind him, a symbol of authority and destruction. Then, his glowing red eyes flickered toward the tower where Luka, Eilei, and Claude had stood before the battle began. A flicker of calculation. Without breaking stride, the Imperial Guard delivered a crushing punch. The impact sent the paladin soaring toward the tower. The moment his body made contact, a devastating explosion erupted. Flames engulfed the structure. The force of the blast sent shockwaves through the air. From a distance, Luka could only watch. His view was obscured by trees, but the sound, the sheer force, left no doubt. His body trembled. His lungs burned with exhaustion. Sweat poured down his face, his breaths ragged, erratic. His mind could barely process what had happened. Then, through the veil of smoke, a silhouette emerged. His figure darkened by the haze, only his glowing red eyes visible. Then, finally, the Imperial Guard stepped forward. His armor bore countless battle scars. His presence, unshaken, unstoppable. The red cloak behind him rippled like fire. Luka's lips trembled as a single, choked whisper escaped him, "I'm saved." But his voice was too weak to be heard. The Imperial Guard turned away. His job was done. He began to walk off, his presence as commanding as ever. Then, behind him, a sound. Luka's eyes snapped toward it. The paladin was rising, his sword still clutched tightly in his grip. His armor cracked, but his resolve unbroken. White energy surged around him. The Imperial Guard halted. Slowly, he turned his head. A faint glow surrounded his body. Then, a surge of red energy erupted from him. The two warriors, one cloaked in white, the other in red, faced each other. The battle wasn't over.